Hello and welcome to another Agoners Battle Report. Right, hello again. Yeah, so we're playing the Ninth Age again, as you'll have seen, and well, I've got the full rule book here for the Ninth Age Fantasy Battles, but I am actually playing Essence of War again still, as you can see on screen, but I'm playing the advanced rules. So if you watched my last video, I did say I was hoping to play some advanced games soon. I have been playing more basic games as well, which are always fun. I've been playing in a tabletop simulator kind of mini tournament organised by Veil of the Ages, Pateo, so that's been fantastic. But I also had arranged a real life game of the advanced rules. So this is a bit of a play test really for these rules as well. So it's really fascinating to be honest because not only are we playing this game, we're also testing the rules out and seeing how we think of them and things like that. So if you follow me on Twitter at Agoners, you'll have already seen me post this. Also my Facebook. I'd already got my strongest potions ready for the battle because I was going into battle and I needed them. So, well, maybe I didn't need them, but you know, not going to say no to a nice pint whilst playing. This is some tropical IPA that I was like testing out at the bar, and it was actually very good. So yeah, if you do get yourself down to Patriot Games Miniatures Wargaming, where this was taking place, yeah, check out the bar. They've got some good drinks on there actually as well. Currently it's held at a place called Theatre Deli in Sheffield. But yeah, they've got their shops hopefully getting back their own gaming space in the near future, so it may well move. But right now it's at a pretty cool location. Very easy for me to get to as well. It's very handy. So I got here early. This was a little picture of me setting things up, so I had plenty of time to mess about, take photos. I was waiting for my opponent to arrive, which is Bart, who you will have seen before on some of my games on this channel. So yeah, what we did to set up this game in the advanced rules, of course, you get to choose your own army list. So what I did, unbeknownst to Bart, I said I'm going to play Empire of Sonnenstahl, and I've already picked my list. Right, so he didn't know what it was, but I posted it on the forum as well, and so some people, so just in case he thought I was trying to do some kind of weird tailoring thing, I had to try and beat whatever he picked or whatever. So I'm not up for that. Basically, I'd already picked my list, and in fact, it was very simple to pick my list because for Empire of Sonnenstahl, we're playing 1,000 point battle, and I only have 1,000 points painted. So basically, all I really had to choose was what equipment I would put on my characters to get myself up to 1,000 points. And apart from that, it was literally every model I have painted that's Empire Sonnenstahl. So my list had really kind of no kind of decision making or tailoring to my opponent, or even though looking at the advanced rules, right, you might design things for certain scenarios, which we'll get onto in a minute. But yeah, so we decided that. But for Bart, I said, well, basically, I've got a large collection of orcs and goblins, which you probably are aware of, and got lots and lots and lots painted. I was guessing how much points I could field if it was Ninth Age Fantasy Battles, or even Essence of War Advanced, because the point systems aren't that different. This was a 1,000 point game, which is roughly equivalent to a 1,000 point game in Ninth Age Fantasy Battles as well as Ninth Age Essence of War Advanced rules. Um, but yeah, I probably got about 6,000 more, or maybe even more points of orcs and goblins because I've got far too many character models. You couldn't possibly field them all. But anyway, yeah, I've got a lot. So basically, well, I could basically put together any list you want to take. So Bart's obviously pretty new to this style of wargaming, so it was pretty, tough ask for him to just say, yeah, but he did have every option under the sun. So it's like basically you can take anything you want. I will be able to provide you the painted models to fit. Like 95%. I was like, the only Orc and Goblin model in the list I don't have painted is Boar Boys actually, or Boar Riders. So, but we could proxy something. We could make it do on most lists unless he took some very specific combinations where I really couldn't really make it work with the miniatures I've got. But I was pretty confident we'd be safe on this one. Um, so yes, you will of course if you're watching this at the current time, if you're watching this soon after I'm recording it, the Orcs and Goblins Advanced Army List isn't in the published version of Essence of War that you can download on the Ninth Age website. But as you can guess by the fact I have access to it because I'm on the team that helps write this, it is coming fairly soon. So I don't want to oversell that. But like obviously this is in alpha testing. So because I'm part of the team writing it and obviously playtesting it, that's why I could give the list to my opponent to give it a go. So we wanted to give this a try. So obviously part of playing this game obviously moves it closer to getting it all published as well for everybody. So that's the good news. Okay, so enough with the beer and the formalities. We'll move on to the list. So this is a new thing for me. I've never had to talk about lists first, but I'll run you down roughly what I've got. And I'll talk a little bit about the advanced rules because there's a few differences if you've only played the basic rules. You might recognise my list is actually the patrol. So I've got the 5x2 handgunners, which are basically exactly as they were in the patrol. I've got the Electoral Cavalry, which are exactly as they were in the Patrol. I've got the Imperial Guard, which are exactly as they were in the Patrol. I've got the Wizard, who I've beefed up a little bit. He's he's a master of pyromancy. So there's a couple of things here. Number one, you can choose to upgrade your wizard to a master level wizard, which gives him more spells, which I've done. And you can also choose your spell lore from a short list that's based around your faction, right? So for the Empire of Sonchtal faction, they have choices of 4 different laws I could go for, and I went for pyromancy. And there is a reason behind this. Basically, because I've got a wizard on foot, and he's worth quite a lot of points. 250 points. If 1,000 points is a quarter of my army is invested in this wizard, right? I was like, well, he's only got resilience 3 and he's got armor 1 and only 3 hit points, and he might do a miscast and all these kind of problems. Part of my reason for picking Pyromancy was to keep him out of the action because everything in Pyromancy either doesn't need a line of sight or it's got, on the case of Fireball, it's got a very long range. So my idea was to give him Pyromancy to keep him out of the action. He didn't want to go in a unit, he didn't want to get anywhere near combat, he didn't want to get anywhere near shooting because I knew anything that the Orcs and Goblins player with any kind of ranged attack would be a serious threat to my poor squishy wizard, basically. But what I have added to the patrol that's completely new is a bunch of spearmen. So they are a block of 5x4 spearmen, so not huge, but it was what I had. The models are actually halberdiers. I apologise, but it's not perfect, but it's pretty close. And I'm also going to take a sip of mineral water there while I'm going with this one. But yeah, I've added the spearmen. I've also added a marshal who is my general. So he's a foot melee character. He's obviously a little bit better armored than the wizard and a little bit more resilient. He's got some better attacks. He's still not amazing. Like he's not super tough. Like don't get me wrong. He's not going to be running around sort of demolishing units by himself or anything like that most of the time. But there's a few strategic situations where maybe he can get in a good fight. He's certainly way better at fighting than the wizard. But more interesting that he is my general. He has a much higher discipline, so he's gone up. Normally in the patrol, you've got an issue with discipline with the Empire Son style because you haven't got a general that gives you discipline, whereas my marshal does. He gives up to discipline 9, so that's really good. I've also given him the battle standard item, which means that you also get a reroll. So basically, when I'm close to my marshal in this battle, I've got discipline 9 space with a reroll. So that's all. I was thinking that's pretty tasty. The chances of me panicking and running away and things like that is pretty low as long as I'm within 12 inches of my marshal. So my marshal's main job is obviously going to be to actually do that. He's mainly a discipline bubble, right? But and it never might, and you never know. Maybe he'll get into a scrap if he really needs to, but that's certainly not his main thing. Um, my units are all pretty small. They're actually all minimum sizes. There are a few extra rules. We mentioned the general and the items and things like that. The marshal also has a rule called orders. He can give out 1 order a turn, which you can upgrade it so he can give out 2 orders a turn, and he can give that to any of my units bar the electoral cavalry. Basically, any of the infantry units he can give an order to in my list. There's some other units he can and can't, basically in the full army list, but out of what I've taken, the only unit he can't give an order to is the electoral cavalry. He's got 3 orders. There's the kind of like a spell in a way. It's like a small buff, but the opponent can't stop it, which is the nice thing about it. So I actually really like this mechanic because the magic phase can feel a little bit, hit and miss. Whereas I was like, actually, this is really cool. So as long as I set things up right, there's nothing my opponent can do about it. So you can give a unit +1 movement, +2 march on 1 turn. Or you can give a unit no shooting penalty for long range. Obviously good on the handgunners. Or you can give a unit fighting extra rank, which means you get another rank of guys fighting, right? So won't be particularly useful on my handgunners of my electoral cavalry anyway, but my Imperial Guard or Spearmen could certainly benefit from that if they haven't took any casualties at least. So the spearmen already have one instance of fighting extra rank, but you can multiply that one out. So you could theoretically get all 20 spearmen fighting in a single combat if they've got. So the first 15 would fight anyway, and then extra 5 if given that order. I can't remember the name of the orders, but they've got cool names too. But at the double or things like that for the movement one. So that's my list. You see, Empire Sunshine, 1,000 points by me. Remy77077, also known as Rick. My opponent was Bart, and as I say, he was playing technically my Orcs and Goblins as well. He has chosen a very different list though from the patrol. So whilst he's got a unit of Orcs and a unit of Goblins, which you'll be familiar with from the patrol, he's beefed them up significantly in size. So his Orc unit's a 7x4 block, so that's 28 Orcs. That's a big load of Orcs. They do have spears as well, as you might know from their stats, but so they also have fighting extra rank now. So the Orcs are a little bit more powerful than they maybe been used to, and with the Born to Fight rule, which they've still got from the patrol, that's actually quite a significant threat in that number. The Goblins, similarly, he's boosted them to a 5x6 block, so really hard to strip ranks off this guy. These guys are basically always going to be steadfast, and yeah, really high numbers and not easy to panic and things like that, which was part of his plan. So I asked Bart, and finally he's got a unit of 3 trolls. Now, trolls they're pretty good fighters. They've got stomp attacks versus small units, things like that. As you'll be familiar with from, say, the Ogre Patrol. They're a little bit like that. They do have some of the rules from Fantasy Battles. They have some of the, but they're missing some of the good rules, but also some of the bad rules. So they kind of balances out. So then, if you're familiar with Fantasy Battles, they don't have the vomit attacks in Essence of War because it's a little bit too complicated, and they're pretty complicated in Fantasy Battles. And not a lot of people know how they work. Actually, I've read the rules on those ones, and I would not have got them right unless someone had told me. Um, but they do cause fear. They are fearless, which I had not realised until we started playing the game actually, when Bart told me that, oh, by the way, they're fearless. And I was like, oh, my plan was to try and shoot them down and panic them, whereas fearless means they cannot panic. So, but they do come, and I say they're not got stupidity though, which is a nice little bonus. So you're losing out on some of the advanced, the full rules in Fantasy Battles, but you are gaining actually by losing some of those rules as well. Some of the simplifications kind of help you out here. They do, however, have a terrible discipline of only 4. So if anything goes wrong with trolls and some reason they have to take a discipline check, if they're not near the general, they're in big trouble. So although they're hard to panic, because of their fearless, well, impossible to panic, um, things can still go awry for them with a very low discipline score. As you can imagine, if they lose a combat or whatever, they aren't going to stick around. Maybe if the general's around, they're all right. There's only 3 of them, but they've got 3 attacks each, plus potentially 3 stomps. So when I looked at this list, my initial problem, of course, is um, I've kind of got the maneuverability because I've got 6 units. He's got 3 big tough units, which head to head basically beat all of my units. Right, front on, like the trolls and the orcs probably pretty much beat all of my units. Now with ranks, I will be steadfast against the trolls for some time, probably with at least my bigger blocks. Right, the spearmen and the Imperial Guard can probably hold up against them, but they're not necessarily winning in the long run. Maybe they are, but it's going to be a little bit dicey. The Orc block 1-on-1, especially if it gets a charge in, that's big trouble for all of my units basically because yeah, none of them really want that fight. Like maybe I've got spells, so Pyromancy has got some buff spells, and obviously I talked about the orders, so maybe I can swing things to be a bit more in my favor. But most of the time, like even the trolls as well, it's like, well, all the orcs, if I did the kind of maths on this, and I was like, well, my Imperial Guard's my best bet because they're pretty good defense and they've got good armor. They can probably definitely hold up for a turn or two, especially if the general's nearby, given the battle standard and things like that. But other than that, I'm a bit of a struggle here. So but I figured I've got the maneuverability advantage, right? Because I've got more units and I've got overall slightly faster units, I suppose. Yeah, because he's got 2 infantry blocks. The trolls are only movement 6, my Galactic Cavalry movement 7. But having 4 units and 2 characters gives me a lot of maneuverability potentially on the field. Whereas the 3 big blocks, they're a bit hard to, you're not going to trick anyone so much with those, right? Didn't mention his shaman, but he does have a general. You have to take at least 1 character because you have to take a general. Even when you're building your list, you can't just only have units. It should be pretty cool in some ways if you could, but you've got to take a general. So this is a very interesting build actually. I talked about this before the game with Bart, right? I don't super like this set of options he's put on the shaman, right? Basically, he's got a magic item called Beyond Reach, which kind of gives him. I was joking saying this gives him a magic shotgun. He's got like an 18-inch shooting attack. That does, and it kind of does like crossbow strength, so it's like strength 4 AP1, so it's pretty powerful. But like, and it's got 3 shots, shoots and hits on threes, I believe. So it's not, it's a decent shooting attack. That's actually a bit of a threat to quite a lot of my units, to be honest. It's going to do some damage. But the problem is, right, you've also got a Master of Pyromancy on this guy, uh, and like trying to use all these weapons, and so he's also got some magic armor called Toxic Ichor, which but Toxic Ichor doesn't actually keep him alive. It does nothing against shooting, number one, so it only activates in melee, and what it does, it hits back against people that hit him. So it causes problems in combat. You probably don't want to necessarily attack him because the Toxic Ichor return attacks could do more damage to you than you're doing to him, right? So you take an option, but because he's a character, right, unless you're fighting him one-on-one, you've obviously always got the option to not attack him. You can, most of the time, anyway. There's certain situations where you'd have to attack him, but most of the time you could avoid attacking him with your infantry if you wanted to, or your unit rather. So anyway, you put all this together, right? And then he's got the thing is he's got pyromancy, right? So he's got an 18-inch scorching salvo, just like my guy has. So it's pyro versus pyro, as let the world burn, as Bart told me before the game, which is pretty accurate, as you'll see. Um, he's got a lot of fiery powers. He's got a buff spell which only helps in melee. Oh, it can help you shooting as well, actually. Interestingly enough, so no, the pyromancy's got a very interesting buff spell that powers up the attacks of a unit shooting or melee, which is pretty useful. But then he's also got a fireball. So, and then he's also the general, right? So to try and use all of those things, he's kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. The Toxic Ichor kind of makes you want to get him into melee almost, and he's obviously okay in melee. He's a lot better than my wizard for sure. But do you want to put him in a unit? But then if he's in a unit and the unit marches, he can't shoot his Beyond Reach like magic weapon. But then he can use his pyromancy. But do you want to be far away doing fireballs and things like that, and just keeping out of line of sight? So I feel like, yeah, I feel like this is an advantage I had, obviously, a bit more experience at this kind of game. I've kind of built my characters to do a specific thing, whereas this Orc Shaman's kind of trying to do a bit of everything and probably not doing any one thing that well. And he costs a lot of points for that reason. So I guess if you were playing like lots of different games, maybe it would work out well overall. But I feel in any one individual battle is likely to not really shine. But we'll see if my predictions work out. So I'll just move on to the first battle shot. Since we've built the list by now, I'm sure you'll see all the miniatures. It should be pretty darn easy to identify who is running what. We've got big block of orcs, of course, big block of goblins, block of trolls, and the shaman. You can see my guys still down the side here. We got dice. I've even brought my little dice box this time to avoid dice flying off the table. Um, this was the scenery. I actually rolled up and put this scenery down before Bart got there. We rolled up map number 1, which was interesting because it's the one with the least amount of terrain on the board. So all we have is one hindering terrain, this wood here, and we have this one impassable terrain here, and we have one hill. That is it. So you can't quite see the whole board here. You might see some nice little things here, like my laser. Also, a bit of Veil of the Ages there. Yeah, I was showing this to people. Some of my custom dice, things like that. Thank you very much, Potato, for sending me all of that beautiful stuff in the Kickstarter. Um, but yeah, so the other thing we had to roll up as well for an advanced game is what would the objective be? Now, before we made our lists, although it wasn't relevant to me because my list was essentially chosen for by what I had painted anyway, right? But we agreed, Bart didn't want to play the central objective type, as we were used to playing that from the basic patrol battles, where you always have to move forward and grab that objective in the middle of the battlefield. Well, whilst in advance it's still slightly different because you still get points for killing enemy units as well, and the objective in the battle in the middle doesn't completely win you the game, right? It only gives you a bonus if you outscore your opponent. So you could theoretically get the objective in an advanced game and still lose because you lost more models, like more units. You have to wipe out entire units or kill entire characters to get points for them. But yeah, so the objectives are always a little bit different in advance because they're not the be all and end all. But because we'd been playing a lot of basic games before, we decided we'd roll on the table but ignore that one. So essentially, there's 3 different objectives we could get, and we rolled up Assassinate, which was kill the enemy general. Now, I'd been talking about this one on the Ninth Age forum actually. It's not an objective I'm a massive fan of, in all honesty, because it really makes your list building. I mean, I guess if you're aware of it going in, you can sort of build your list around it. Like it's probably better to have like what I've got, where my general is a melee character, um, or and then you've got a separate wizard, right? Whereas because Bart's got kind of all his eggs in one basket with a single wizard who is also his general, and also don't forget your generals generally. Your general is always very important for orcs and goblins because they don't have good discipline on their units by default, particularly the trolls and the goblins, of course. So they really, yeah, he's got all his eggs in one basket, and then he's put more eggs in it. Basically, what's happened here? And then we've got the objective on top of that. A little bit crazy situation. It's still a risk though because this year the reason I'm not sure. I mean, we obviously this is part of the playtesting, right? So we're discussing how these objectives work. Are they a good idea? Do they have any sort of downsides to playing it? Um, and one of the reasons to say is that it affects the list building. Like you're very much you probably what it's going to increase your chances of wanting to make a tough to kill general. Don't have to be necessarily that good at anything else, but neither of us, even my guy, so he's got like res for one armor, 3 hit points. Even my general's got res for 3 armor and 3 hit points. And so depending on what you get hit by, the only difference is the 1 armor or 3 armor, right? Neither of them's that tough. They generally have to then escape. Now, it might make you want to put them in the unit more, but in general, I feel like it will really trend towards not wanting to have foot-mounted characters because they obviously don't get the armor save of being on a mount. Not sure how it'll work out. I mean, this is the first game I've played with it, so I don't want to be too harsh on my own rules. But just to bear in mind, we do listen to this kind of critique. So if you've got any thoughts about it, drop it in the comments below. Drop it on the forum. I know they've been playing some fantasy battles games with interestingly different objectives at times too. Henry P. Miller talked about it on one of his podcasts. I think it's Hammer Time podcast. Oh, apologies if I've got the wrong name. I listen to a lot of podcasts and sometimes I forget which is which. Um, but yeah, it's that one he was commenting. They did have a similar objective to this in a fantasy battles game, although a smaller points game. Um, and they were saying that again, it kind of affected the way the game's played out, maybe in not the most fun manner. But they were saying if it was a hidden objective, like you didn't know what the opponent's objective was, which you could do with some cards or something like that. So you could see the card, but your opponent couldn't. Like then maybe that it could have more effect and maybe be a bit more fun and be well as much effect but less kind of play. But I feel like even the existence of the objective um, pre-list building stage affects what you want to build. It may be in a good way, but I'm not sure I like it because I generally prefer, like, one of the nice things about Essence of War in general is that your units are generally the emphasis of the battle rather than your characters. Whereas in Ninth Age fantasy battles, because you can tool up your characters with a lot of magic equipment and there's much more powerful characters than we have in Essence of War at all, they can really become the focal point of the battle quite quickly in some armies particularly. Whereas we don't really have that, and we want to keep the focus a bit more on the units. So yeah, but well, it remains to be seen. So anyway, moving quickly on, Bart was just messing about. This isn't actually his deployment, but he has chosen that side, which I thought was interesting. I'll leave my tactical thoughts a little bit for the end because see what you make of it first. Um, that is his final deployment. Orcs in the middle, Shaman off to the side. Trolls are positioned behind the impassable terrain, which sort of covers them to most extent, right? Maybe I can get a couple of shots around the side. So what he's clearly trying to do, and then the goblins are also behind the terrain. So he's clearly trying to protect from shooting. So wherever I put the handgunners, right? If I put the handgunners trying to shoot the goblins, that's actually a really bad move, right? I don't want to have the goblins completely outshoot my handgunners, believe it or not. So that's really it. I do not want to be anywhere near those goblins, which I think maybe Bart didn't consider. Because the 15 bow shots is a lot better when I've got no armor. I mean, well, actually, I suppose the handgunners will do a bit more damage, but there's 30 of these guys versus my 10 handgunners, right? They're going to win in the end. Whereas his orcs are kind of out in the open. He has put his so he carefully looked at all the angles and things. Um, and he has positioned his shaman a little bit back on purpose, but everyone is within 12 inches. So that's his deployment. He can wheel either way around that building. I did tell him make sure you don't block yourself in because that's a big mistake that some new players can make. Something we hope to add some tips into the rulebook maybe one day, some extra content that we're working on. That's something I would like to put in is a little tip around about don't get too close to an impassable terrain unless you really, really, really mean to do it. Because yeah, but he hasn't there. He can wield either side of that, which is part of his plan. So I get to counter deploy, which is obviously, as I've said, can be an advantage. Maybe less an advantage in this scenario though, because say the objective is kill the general, so there's no central objective to win in the last turn or anything like that. But having the last turn still could be good, whereas he guarantees himself deployment and first turn. But I feel like the ability to counter deploy and kind of pick my battles a little bit is going to be really helpful to me, especially when they've got these big, big, scary orc blocks and big, scary goblin block and even a pretty scary troll block, in all honesty. So this is what I do, gone for an overhead side view here. Um, so my thinking is, I'll just explain this. My spearmen want to get in a fight ASAP with these goblins, right? Because I reckon they can take them. We've got better armor, we've got more attacks. Apart from that, they're kind of even because there's not much in it, but they've got a little bit of arm penetration. So overall they should win, right? And especially I'm like, well, I don't want to get them shots, but then I want to get into some action. Like I could try and sit off or something silly like that. But I didn't want to do that. My Imperial Guard are in the middle. This is just because, as I said, they have the best chance of holding against the Orcs, right? I don't actually want that fight, but I don't really want to know Bart to know that I don't want that fight. So I'm going to use my usual trick of I've done this a few of my battles before. If you've watched all my videos in the past for basic games as well, where I've kind of pushed up a unit trying to look like I want to fight and then backed off. And that's kind of my idea. I will even flee potentially if I have to, because if they flee but they're going to move within the general's radius, I've got a 9 with a reroll to rally. So almost guaranteed rally, right? So I'm not scared of making a flee maneuver with anyone that's near the general potentially. That's part of why I love this high discipline battle standard general build. I think it's pretty strong for Empire Sunstyle. It kind of covers a lot of their weaknesses, right? And plus, obviously, he's nearby to give orders to everybody here, and everyone's within 12 inches of my general as well at the moment, although the cavalry are only just. My handgunners have set up on the hill. Now, the nice thing here is they can see over the hill, so they can target pretty much anything. What they can't shoot over, in essence, of war rules is this impassable terrain, though. So at the moment, before he moves at least, because I've got the second turn, of course, um, on turn if he doesn't move out. So at the moment his trolls are pretty safe. I think maybe one or two you can see them, but that like if I shoot the trolls, I'm basically wasting my shooting pretty much because I'll only get a couple of shots that can actually see them. And I don't mind that because I'm like, well, he has to pop out somewhere, right? If he wants to use his trolls, I'm like, I'm happy. This is the other thing, right? So that one of the factors I realized was because his units are all so big, all his units cost more points than all of my units. So any one of my units, right, I'm happy to trade 1 for 1 against any one of his. I come out on top, right? Even my I think my most expensive unit is maybe the Imperial Guard, and they still cost less than the unit of trolls. So and they'll probably lose as well in the front, right? So it's an interesting scenario for me. I actually thought this was really fascinating. I enjoy this kind of more small unit style. Um, the more I played it, the more actually this suits me. I really enjoy this. It's harder to play with maybe, but it's actually quite a bit more tactical than like the big blocks. Even though big blocks, it's good fun sometimes. And hey, I'm an Orcs and Goblins player, so don't think I'm always going to play like this, right? But anyway, and then I put my cavalry on the flank again. This is kind of a counter move. I'm using the classic, right? I want to get in a position to threaten a flank charge. And again, I'm like, well, if your trolls come out to try and fight my cavalry, I'm going to get some shots at you. I can do some fleeing potentially, because even though they might get out of general's radius, they've still got discipline 8, which isn't too bad. And actually, as well, because he doesn't get stomp attacks against my cavalry, and they have got the best armor, of course. They're probably going to lose to the trolls, right? To be honest, because the trolls have got strength 5 AP2, which is bad news for knights even. But they've got a reasonable chance to not get completely smashed by the trolls, basically. And my kind of plan is, if I can 2-on-1 them, if I can shoot off a troll or two with my handgunners, or kill one and maybe weaken them, and then maybe the cavalry can get in and maybe finish off. And once you get down to one troll, the cavalry can probably win that on the charge at least, right? So Yeah, that's kind of my plan. My wizard is hiding behind the hill. Um, Now, this the big factor here is we've both got pyromancy, we've both got a 36-inch fireball, right? And he's got the first turn. I do not want, you'll see my characters are hiding, one behind the unit, one behind a hill. I do not want him shooting anything at my general or my wizard on turn one with his magic. Okay, so again, I'm protecting my characters here on turn one. So that's my play. Go over to Bart's turn one. Orcs and Goblins all know the shot first. I'm lying. Getting a bit of beer in. There's some 40k going on in the background over here. I'm not quite pushed up against my deployment zone, and neither is Bart. We kind of left a bit of half inch for some reason. I don't know why. We could have pushed forward a bit more than we did. Obviously, the handgunners are back a little bit because again, I'm kind of saying, well, come at me, bro. I'll shoot you. And they're a long way away from the Goblin archers, of course. So that's the one thing I don't want getting near them. It's got to get a long way to go. They want to try and march forward, but then I want to get this fight anyway, so that suits me. So you can see my counter deploy is very much based around getting the matchups I want. So that's my positioning. Orcs Goblins, another shot of the armies to see my painting a little bit. We have, of course, got these beautiful Essence of War Flux cards that my friend Bart made for me. This lovely little hut, which my friend Rob actually originally made, and I have touched up the paint job significantly because it was showing its age a little bit, I have to say, but I've spruced it up, given it a spring cleaning, and I rather like it. Good job, Rob. To be honest, though, the beautiful highlighting on those bits were done by Rob. So full credit to Rob if you're watching. Well done, mate. Right. Anyway, so turn one. First of all, I haven't got shots of everything, but I was taking shots every now and again, and hopefully I can fill in the blanks for you. As you would expect, no charges on turn one, but the Orcs do shuffle forward a little bit. The Goblins move forward but don't march because they want to do some long range shooting. Turn one magic phase. Again, there's not many spells that were relevant. I think he tried to. Yeah, well, first of all, he cast a fireball on the handgunners. Only killed two, which wasn't. That's not far off average. Maybe a little bit unlucky, but not quite enough for a panic test, which I wasn't too scared of. Still a little bit annoying because I do like these handgunners, but no armor on them, guys. I mean, come on, guys, sort this out. You should be wearing more than just your pajamas, but that's the way Empire Assange now roll, of course. What can you do about it? So yeah, I'm a bit vulnerable to that, but I'm like, well, it's better than my character's taking some hits, so I have to take it. And again, my good news is I'm like, well, unless he wipes the unit out, what my thinking is in the long term of this game, if they're probably not going to panic as long as my general's nearby, but even if they do panic, I can probably rally them if the general's nearby as well. And worst case scenario, if they get down to only one or two guys left, I'm actually going to back them off the hill and just hide them. They're just I don't want to lose the points for this unit. They're going to do some shooting and then they're going to run off if necessary. That's the game plan for the handgunners, right? Um, so yeah, so on to I can't quite remember how this happened. Sorry, right? Yeah, so that was his turn one. Moved up a little bit. He tried to cast flaming swords on the goblins, but failed to cast it. And then he tried some long range shots at and then moved. Of course, there were sixes to hit. Didn't get any hits at all. Not everyone was in range either. I think only about 9 of them could actually get in range of my spearmen because I hadn't positioned them far forward. Neither had Bart. So with the 4-inch move, he didn't get the full 15 shots because it is individual units. Sorry, individual models within the unit. You have to measure each range separately. So he didn't get very many shots. Didn't get lucky. Didn't get any hits, and he didn't get flaming swords off on them either, so that would have boosted their bow fire a little bit, but not to be. So my turn one, the most significant thing I did was, you'll see my positioning in a moment, but my wizard did pop up onto the hill. All my units moved forward a little bit, and I did a long-range fireball, and I did get it off, and I did hit his shaman, already taking 1 wound, as you can see by this little wound marker here. Nice little close up of my painting though. How about those banners? This is my favourite Goblin Banner. I did this guy the other day. He's a really, really old metal miniature, and I didn't realise he had a tiny little banner pole in the past. And I was like, why have they got these tiny little banners? And then I looked into some old GW things, and I saw what they'd done. They'd actually replaced the tiny banner poles with big poles. I was like, that's a genius idea. So I put a massive big banner on him, so he'd look a lot cooler. But yeah, 1 hit point lost on the shaman from a fireball, which is a bit scary for him. There, one fireball can kill, and obviously that is the objective: kill the general. He had backed off a little bit to try and avoid. What Bart did in his movement phase in his previous turn. He'd put a marker where my handgunners could move and shoot. And he'd made it impossible for me to get any shots on anything but the orcs, basically. So I couldn't get in on the goblins, and I certainly couldn't get the handgunners shooting him. But he had left him open for the fireball war. So the fireball pyromancy battle begins, and I take first shot, which I thought would be the goal. And again, I kind of decided, do I want this? And I'm like, yes, I do want this, because assuming we just fireball each other for the rest of the game, turn it into a game of Street Fighter, Hadouken, Hadouken, and we were doing the sound effects and stuff. It was great. Because I'm like, I want this because, okay, my wizard is slightly more easy to kill than his shaman is, but there's not much in it from a dice point of view. And also, if he loses his shaman, that's the objective for me as well. Whereas if I lose my wizard, okay, that's bad, but I don't lose the objective, right? So my marshal can still run around. So I've got a strong incentive to take this gamble, right? And it is a gamble, I know. Like I could hide my wizard from his wizard, but I'm like, come on, guys, let's take some gambles here. We got to play for the win, right? So that was my positioning. I said we'd show it a bit later. So that's how it ended up. As I said, he didn't do much movement in his first turn. Just shuffled forward a little bit, trying to make sure I couldn't get any good shots to the handgunners, which I could not. I don't think I had any shots. Maybe I had a couple of guys into the orcs. I can't remember. But anyway, this didn't do any damage or whatever happened. Um, my orders, I don't think I did. I can't remember. I think I just no. I don't think I did any orders. I didn't mark it what I did anyway because I may have forgotten it on the first turn. But yeah, you can see my wizard there. Long line of sight. Could be shooting at anything, but obviously with the again, this comes down to that build, right? So the way this guy's positioned right now, we'll come back to that in a little bit anyway at the end of the game. And I have pushed up right forward. I think I might have given extra march to the spearmen actually, so they could push up a little bit farther. Yeah, it looks like I have gone a little bit further with that. And my marshal shuffled over this way, which is trying to keep everyone in 12 inches. But I actually got something slightly wrong here, which I'll come to in the next turn. First of all, Orcs and Goblins turn 2. So he takes a very interesting maneuver here. And there was just space for him to do this. We had a bit of shenanigans trying to figure this out. But he could swing round, come forward, and then swing back again. He kind of tried, we had to mark the unit. We tried a few times with this one, with his trolls trying to move around here. Trying to get in front. Uh, So what he was trying to do, his first time he attempted it, he was kind of giving me a flank from the cavalry and things like that. So I was like, no, no, don't do that. Like he was just going to run like kind of straight across towards my spearmen, which I'm not quite sure what Bart was trying to do. But I was like, well, think about that. Are you sure you want to do that? Because like, think about what I can charge next turn. And he was like, oh yeah, I don't want to give my flank and my trolls to like the Imperial Guard and some cavalry, and like that's a bit crazy. So we had a rethink, and then extended just kept them meant they couldn't get as far forward, of course, but meant they were presenting their front. So they've pushed forward. The Orcs are pushed up right as far as they can behind them. There's a little inch gap-ish in there. He considered backing off with his shaman because he could. I was like, well, I've got a 36-inch range, but if I move off the hill, then obviously I can't. He can then hide behind a unit. So there was a few positions he could get to with the shaman, running it back into this corner here where I couldn't actually see him because if I moved off the hill to get within range, I'd lose my line of sight from being on the hill. So elected not to do that though, which might be a foolish maneuver. But yeah, he's gambling. He's gambling. So that's how he's positioning. And the goblins again push forward, not quite getting into short range, but does get more shots. But he's moved right into the wood here, and I'm like, I don't know about this because I did remind him about the steadfast rule in woods. There's a broken ranks rule, so if you're even though he's a big block of goblins, it would normally be steadfast forever, right? You will not steadfast if the majority of your models are in the wood, which they certainly are there. So this encouraged me. I said I kind of want the spearman versus goblin fight. Again, I'm thinking about it like in terms of trades. So if my spearmen go into the goblins, beat them, even if I lose my spearmen, I don't care because I'm coming out on top, right? That's kind of my thinking because I know that the spearmen should beat the goblins, but then hey, they might get then countercharged and have a bad time. But that's okay, especially if they're not steadfast. They only need to win by 1 or 2 points, and those goblins have got a very good chance of running right from the spearmen. So that was my plan. Um, but yeah, instead he joined in the Hadoken battle and decided he'd do the fireball back at me. I think once again he also failed to cast Flaming Swords, so he got a bit unlucky on that one. But I think on 2 dice you need like an 8, or no, I think you need a 7, and he didn't get it on Flaming Swords 2 turns in a row there. So that was a bit disappointing for Bart on the dice front. And even more disappointing is Fireball, which is only did 1 wound to my wizard. So 1 wound apiece on the Fireball war right now. On average, it should be doing about 2 a turn, right, to both of them, even slightly higher than 2 a turn on my wizard. So my wizard got off with that one lightly. Thankfully, he can't get shot at by any bowmen or anything like that. But again, it's a big risk though because his shaman is way, way, way more valuable, not just in points, but in objective and everything, and in terms of battle strategy than my wizard is, right? Because I can kind of throw my wizard away if I need to, like whereas he definitely can't lose his shaman. So Bart takes the gamble. Wants to play some Street Fighter. We did used to play Street Fighter 2 against each other in the back in the days, so there we go. So there's where I did a bit of cheating. Actual mistake here. I realised after the game that orders only go 8 inches, not 12 inches. So actually, what I did here, I wanted this charge, and I had a real think about it. Like, do I try and give the fight an extra rank order to these spearmen to try and make them more likely to beat the goblins, or do I want to give them +1 movement to try and make them more likely to make this charge? Because it's about an 11-inch charge, I believe. Um, so I give them +1, it gives them much better odds to make it. That was kind of my goal. Yeah, because some of them were in close range, which is why you moved up a bit further. Yeah, that's right. So I gave them +1 movement. In retrospect, I think my marshal was actually too far away to give that order to the spearman. So apologies, Bart. That was a complete mistake on my part. I did realise it later in the game. Actually, no. Look, there has been one spearman killed by shooting as well. So that's apologies. I think I'm jumping ahead here as well. So yes, he did actually manage to some bow shots on the spearman. Did kill one. But yeah, so yes, no. Here's my order that I was talking about. So I've given them. This is going into my next turn, my turn 2. I have given them that little marker there. That dice is supposed to indicate that they've got +1 movement. But justice was done right for my attempted cheating because I actually rolled only 4, so they did a tiny movement forward anyway. So it didn't affect the game. That's the good news. My cheaty order, extra range on my orders apparently I've bought, but yeah, something interesting that actually it does make it a lot harder to use. Actually, 12-inch bubble is not too bad, but an 8-inch bubble actually very tricky to pull off. I think my Imperial Guard did the patented shuffle back in a moment, but yeah, that charge fails. Um, the Imperial Guard did the shuffle back as I was suspecting I wanted to do. My cavalry kind of shuffled forward. Actually, it's quite a big move actually because they were right back here. They've done quite a big wheel and wheel back to get in a very nice flanking position here, saying, "Okay, trolls, if you come forward, you better watch yourselves, guys." Because I'm like, well, I also you're coming into my fire zone here with my handgunners, and so I'm kind of dual threating this one here. Um, my wizard decided again. We're like, well, we're fully on this gambling, this fireball war, right? But what I'm going to do is move down here to threaten. This gets me within 18 inches for the for my buff spell. It gets within 18 inches of the spearman actually. Well, all my units here, so I can use flaming swords on anyone from this position. I can also hit a scorching salvo that will contact the trolls. Not that scorching salvo is a huge threat, but basically I was hoping for a good magic phase, and I thought, well, if I position here, I'm not really losing out. I can run back to the hill next turn if I need to. But from this position, I'm kind of maximizing the potential of all my spells, was my thinking. Um, as it is, I only got I can't remember. I think I only got like 4 dice versus 2 phase. And actually, what happened was I put all my dice into Fireball anyway because I was like, well, forget this. Like, clearly the most important thing is to cast a Fireball and make sure it hits that shaman, right? And it did, and it killed him. I got 5 hits on him, and yeah, rolled enough, and he didn't get. Yeah, I think he needed. Yeah, he had 3 dice. So I did 3 damaging hits, and he needed 2 6s on 3 dice because he have got armor 1, the shaman, and he didn't get the 2 6s on 3 dice. So shaman died, and that caused him all no end of problems because of course the trolls can't panic because they're fearless, but the orcs and the goblins certainly could. And what happened is the orcs were okay. They passed their discipline 7, which is very dicey, as I'm sure you know. And the goblins failed their discipline 6 and panicked. So this was going all sorts of horribly wrong already for Bart on turn 2 here. this gamble to take this viable battle has not paid off at all. The good news for him, though, is my handgunners were in range now of the trolls, and that was their shooting roll. There's a lot of 1s and 2s and 3s in that, and absolutely not a single handgunner hit. So there was a little bit of an upswing. But overall, that losing that shaman, that's like about 500 victory points, and we're only playing a 1,000-point game. So you can basically see, as long as I don't lose my general, it's basically GG. We kind of called the game there because it's like, well, I'd have to really mess up to lose this game now. I could pretty much run away for the rest of the game probably and be okay. Um, but we will see. We'll see if I do that. Spoilers, I don't. But here's the bad news. We see the goblins panicking over here. We are into the next Orcs and Goblins turn though, and he does declare a charge. The bad news of this failed charge by me, they just moved into a flank arc, which is very bad news on the trolls. My original intention was to flee this, but I'd actually positioned my marshal quite badly in the previous turn, so not only had I cheated on my orders, I'd also messed up because I was thinking, oh, well, they're going to flee straight backwards, right, into the marshal's 12-inch bubble. And then I remembered, hang on, if they flee from the trolls, not the goblins, who I wouldn't have fled from anyway, had they not panicked and charged me, I'd have been like, yep, come and have a go, boys. But because the trolls were charging on this angle, if I fled, they'd be moving away from my marshal, and therefore their rally check next turn would only be on a 7, when not a 9 with a reroll. And the difference of that is a lot of difference in the odds of that. So I was like, oh, that's bad news. But I was like, but they're within 12 inches now, so I figured actually, no, I'll hold this charge. I'll almost certainly be steadfast, because the trolls can't break steadfast because they've only got 1 rank, right? So I'm going to lose a lot of spearmen, but I'm going to be steadfast. I'm going to be able to probably reform, because again, I can use the marshal's discipline. And then I'm probably going to lose them, right? But at least it gives me a fighting chance to not, I didn't want to just run off the board and just do something dumb. This whole decision making was a moot point, however, because as you might be able to see, these double ones, oh my goodness, Bart's luck just completely had gone now, right? So he rolls a double 1, the trolls go nowhere. And this is super bad for so many reasons. So not only does he fail this charge against my spearmen, who are now laughing, right? He also, because he's blocked up his orcs behind them, and we did talk about this after the game actually. Like whenever you put a unit in front of another unit and something goes wrong in Ninth Age, it's very bad times for you, and it's generally something I try and avoid doing. I find in the Ninth Age rules, including Essence of War, it's just generally quite a big risk to stack units on top of each other like this, and this is one of the reasons why if the front unit fails a charge, the back unit's now essentially stuck for a turn 2, which is exactly what happened here. So yeah, this is Orcs Goblins turn 3, of course, just to bear in mind. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So yeah, really bad news. So they sort of swing around like that. The Orcs then try and maneuver. The only bit of blessing in disguise here is the Goblins, the Goblin Archers do rally. So you see they've turned around there. You can see by the banner very clearly these guys are no longer fleeing. And that's a little overview of the battlefield with Bart trying to measure some stuff on my tokens and things along the side. Moving on, so it's my turn. So obviously from this position, you can guess what I'm going to do. I'm going to try another reasonably long charge here. I think I need an 8 or something, but I'm definitely having that because I said I want this fight. The frustrating thing, we looked at the arc. I can't quite get out of the arc of the orcs, but maybe I can if I lose enough spearmen. I've lost 1 already. If I lose a few more, the orcs might not be able to charge me. Plus, depends on what happens to the trolls. And you'll see, I am going to charge the trolls. And one of the downsides of Fearless is he can't flee it. And we looked at this, by the way. They could contact with 2 guys. I think I might have done this slightly wrong, actually. I think I might have done the cheaty double wheel. I'm not sure. I may have got it. So I did contact with 2 guys fighting, not 1. But I could definitely, well, I could definitely make this charge. That was not in doubt. But I was trying to work out, could I get 2 knights in on their flank or only 1 due to the positioning of the trolls close to the building. But we worked it out as 2 guys could get in at the time, and I'm not 100% sure that was right looking back. But, we'll see how that affects the game anyway. So move on, that's my charges. They did successfully roll. I rolled really high on both of them. The Knight charge obviously very easy. They also have Swift Stride in the advanced rules, so they're pretty good at this. And as I say, I have just clipped with 2 guys. This is a great fight for me. This is exactly what the trolls don't want, unfortunately, and also really what the goblins don't want. They'd really like to have a few more shots at these spearmen before they get in this fight, right? And then they can probably win if they've whittled down the numbers of the spearmen. But right now, almost undamaged spearman unit, exactly what I'm going for. You'll also see in my magic phase, I have gone for, rather than trying anything else, I've gone for the flaming swords. That markers to indicate flaming swords is off on the spearmen. And I believe my movement option, I think I might have given a movement boost. No, I get the long range firing boost to my handgunners right now because they can actually see the orcs. So I was like, well, the orcs are the only thing not in combat, and because I'm on the hill, I can look over everything and see them. So I'm like, okay, best thing I can do with my order is get in that fight. So we'll go on to my shooting phase. And I did kill 3 orcs with handguns, so that's a pretty good bit of shooting there. I would say long range, but with no penalties because they didn't move, or long range, so they were hitting on 4s at that point. So even though there was 8 of them, the handgun's pretty powerful with that order on. So something not to be sniffed at. This pursuit path, by the way, will not contact this fight. So I decided to do this battle first, but it was pretty much a moot point because these 2 fights were going to happen independently, basically, no matter what happened. In retrospect, maybe I should have done it the other way round, just due to how the knights, if the knights made a really long pursuit, they may, actually no, maybe it's probably better. So if the knights roll a really high pursuit roll, they could maybe hit my spearmen. And I can't remember if they backtrack or bump forward. I think they backtrack in that situation, which is bad news because they'll end up right in front of the orcs. Um, Whereas I wasn't thinking this. To be fair, I wasn't thinking this through. All I was thinking was, I want to get those knights in the flank of those trolls. That's a really good fight. A flank battle against a unit with discipline 4, right? That ain't good news for them. Starting 3 combat points up, with the charge and 2 for the flank, right? So yeah, that's a horrible fight for the trolls. So and I'm thinking, well, as long as I win that fight, I'll trade my knights. As I said, I'll trade my knights for the trolls if I have to, no problem. So I'm trying to remember. Oh yes, so what that fight did go off. I did lose 1 knight. I think I did 1 damage to 1 troll. And Bart nearly passed his discipline check, so he got the 4. So if he had like had the general still around, or if he'd had it, yeah, we were just like, oh my goodness, it's so close. I think he needed a 3 and he got a 4. Maybe he needed 2. But anyway, either way, it's a real shame. As I say, it wouldn't have mattered even if though I hadn't had the 2 guys fighting because the 1 damage didn't actually matter with that roll, I don't believe. So yeah, it was unfortunate for Bart. But then obviously I pursued, and now I've got Swift Stride, and I did catch the trolls and wipe them. That caused another panic test on the Orcs, who've now taken 2 panic tests, and he passed both of them, though. So 2 discipline 7s, risky, bisky business for those Orcs, but they've got away with it. So yeah, the big blocks, obviously still going to be worried about panic. We then moved on to this combat, and I have, I think I have a shot of it. Apologies for this. I've missed a shot of this combat, I think. But you can see what happens. I killed a bunch of goblins. He killed a bunch of spearmen though, and we actually tied. So even with flaming swords on and a charge, because I lost my back rank from some good rolling from those goblins, I was rather disappointingly, and I was like, I'm in the wood. Then oh, actually no, sorry, their current rallied position, they're not actually in the wood, and I am. So disaster would have been if I'd lost. I'd have been running probably, because again I would not be steadfast. Although again my marshals moved up, so that was to try and at least give me a good chance of not fleeing if I did lose. But yeah, bad times, and I have moved up a little bit with my Imperial Guard as well. Obviously getting gung ho at this stage of the battle, since it's all going quite well for me. But yeah, that tied combat was a bit of a shock for me. I was like, ow. I expected the spearmen to kind of smash through those goblins, really, especially with the buff spell on. But nope, it was not to be. Um, but the next turn, of course, the Orcs take this charge into those Kniggets, and they absolutely smash them with the flank charge. They kill 2 of them, but they don't catch them on the pursuit. However, in this combat, I roll absolutely ridiculous. I can't remember how many goblins I killed. It was something like 11 goblins or something crazy. The spearmen made up for their rather rubbish rolling on the previous turn and went absolutely bananas and just slaughtered goblins left, right, and centre, prodding them with their pointy sticks. Destruction was around, so the goblins did flee, This was, of course, in the Orc player's turn, so this is in Bart's turn. The Goblins lost the combat, the Orcs won their combat. We didn't. We realised Bart maybe should have done them in the other order, but then we realised it actually didn't matter because the Orcs can't panic because the Goblins, they're insignificant now. So that's another buff. So the Orc and Goblin Advanced Army list has actually got a number of significant buffs over their patrol because you do gain insignificant on the Goblins and you do gain extra shots. You get an extra row of shots from your bows and you get an extra row of attacks from your Orcs. So yeah, good news for Orc and Goblin players when they move up to the advanced rules. We've generally tried to keep it like that, by the way. It's one of our goals in Essence of War, the way we write the rules and the way we add layers to the rules. Um, and it's even when you move on to fantasy battles as well, if you decide to move up to the more advanced rules, we've tried to make it feel like you're never losing something good. So we only kind of give you extra stuff, if that makes sense. So the idea is that your units kind of feel a bit better as you move up through the rule systems, right? Um, Rather than we don't want to have something where like they're more powerful in like Essence of War Basic than they are in Advanced, or they're more powerful in Essence of War Advanced than they would be in fantasy battles. Um, but yeah, that's what we're trying to avoid anyway. So that's the positioning. This is my turn 4 now. This is the end of Orcs Goblins turn 4. They've only got the Orc block left. I've got a fleeing unit of cavalry. I've got some Imperial Guard. I've got a wizard. I think you can probably predict where this is going. And that was just that movement. Another little look at the battlefield there. Could try some handgun shots and some running away, but of course I'm not going to do that. Everyone decides to charge. I've also put an order down, so I put fighting extra rank down on my Imperial Guard, which is a really useful one for them. When they're not been taking any damage anyway. Also particularly against the Orcs, because they do, although they've only got agility 3, Orcs have of course agility 2, so my guys are going to swing first. So I'm going to get all 15 guys fighting, and he can't get all of them fighting. I sent in my Marshal himself too, which actually was a huge mistake. My thinking was that I'd be able to get. Well, he'd have the same number of attacks back at me anyway. But actually, when we resolved this charge, I realised I could to maximise contact, I could do a wheel with my Imperial Guard, wheeling this way, hitting him like here, and then getting up to like here. But then my Marshal would have to go first and charge in over here. So actually, I did a double dunce here. So not only did I risk my Marshal going into the fight, but the really wide frontage of the Orcs to try and get more and more Orcs into the fight, because you have to try and maximize both sides fighting when you do charges, right? Um, Meant that I was bringing additional Orcs that wouldn't have been fighting into the combat too. That was rather foolish. This was a decision, of course. So there's currently 3 Orcs here, but only 2 of them will be able to hit this guy, and he's got 2 hit points left. So I was like, it's a gamble, but again, I'm playing. I was like, well, I could play for the guaranteed win, or I could play for a bigger win, right, and take some risks. And obviously, this is a friendly game. It's a playtest game. I'm like, obviously, I'm going to gamble, right? So my wizard charges in the flank, which is nice for me. I get all the combat bonuses. However, the disadvantage is that if he does get killed, it's going to obviously cost against me, right, big time. So I'll lose my flank bonus, and he'll get a lot of victory points for killing the mage. So I know Bart is going to try and do that rather than try and kill the Imperial Guard. So we do rally the knights, and we go to this combat. I also get our flaming swords on these Imperial Guard. So this is mega buff time. They've got everything I can possibly give them. We've got the charge, we've got a flank, we've got all the buffs on them. So this was, and the Orcs have taken a few casualties already from the handgunners, right? So as I said, I didn't like this fight one-on-one, but this is not one-on-one. This is a perfect situation. I've got bonuses coming in, I've got characters coming in, I've got all the buffs. This is and against a damaged Orc unit, this is the time I did want this fight, if I was ever going to have it. And as you can see, I didn't do too bad rolling either. I think there's about 9 Orcs killed. Does swing back, of course, though. And he actually does it. You can barely see it, but he kills 3 Imperial Guard, which you can see. Does 2 hit points to my Marshal. Nearly got himself killed, but very, very fortunately didn't. Didn't do a wound to my mage though, so I got away with that one. This ended up being with that many casualties though, and with I think we're tied on ranks now, plus the charges, plus the flanks. It ended up being a huge win to me. I think we might have calculated it slightly wrong. He may have had a double one. I think we thought it was an auto break, but when I did the maths later again, I may have made a small calculation around that one. He might have had a double one to pass it. which he did roll a double one earlier. So again, Bart, I apologise if I did mess up this maths on this one. Um, but it was a very, very, very low odds. Not the Orcs were not going to run, and they did run. And obviously, I pursued with everyone. And to add insult to injury, the only guy who actually caught them was the wizard. So the fact the wizard went in, being a bit risky, did actually pay off for me. So I was pretty chuffed about that, right? So that was the final position. It only took the 4 turns. We didn't have to play the 5th turn, proving that you don't need the 5th turn even in advance. But yeah, advanced rules do have 5 turns. We've got a little proxy table gaming dice over here, just advertising them at the guys. Playing games against both Hyper-G and Lucky Sixes this week, so that's all been fun. That's how it ended up. So what realistically, the Empire Sonnenstahl ended up with actually no lost units. Although everyone's took damage, they've only got 2 knights left, only got 8 Agoners. Both the characters are damaged. Imperial Guard are damaged. The Spearmen are damaged. But I managed to kind of get this sort of MSU style to work for me, where all my units took a bit of damage, but no one actually got killed. So obviously there was no need to calculate victory points because it was an all route and a rout basically of the Orcs and Goblins. That's my look at it, right? So didn't talk too much. I talked a bit of tactics and strategy during this game. I realise it's going to be a bit of a longer video than some of my other ones, but I do think this was really interesting to play out. I do think, looking back, I had a big think about this one because I thought, well, did I have a big advantage at the list building stage? Possibly, but I don't think it was that great, right? So I think there's 2 things I would have done if I had to replay this from the same scenario, the same map even, as the Orcs and Goblins player, right? We're talking, okay, would you change your list? So I've sort of Bart's homework is to have a think about, like, if he wanted to build a list to beat mine, what would he take? So that's one aspect to it, is how would you change your list if you knew what you were fighting? I think that's an interesting kind of thought experiment to always do in these kind of war games. But the other thing that's interesting to me was like, okay, what would I do given the same list in the same scenario? What could I do differently to try and win it, or at least improve my odds of winning, right? The thing I reckon was there was taking that chance with the shaman was too big a risk. There's no way you can sustain fireballs like I know you might kill off my wizard first, right? Which if you do it, great. But given I could hide behind the hill and I had first shot, right? It just wasn't worth it. So again, I would have taken this side for starters. I wouldn't have deployed over here. I could understand why Bart wanted to because he wanted the cover, thinking I've got a lot more shooting than him. But the weird thing is, even if I had to deploy first as the Orcs and Goblins, I would definitely have picked this side um, because it's denying the hill. It's more about denying the hill to the Emperor Sonnenstahl player. That's what I would have cared about the most. And as I say, even if I got handgunners versus Goblin bows in the woods, the Goblin bows are fine with that. I actually suppose sitting on 6s versus sitting on 5s with the orders, maybe not, but I'm not sure how I'd have positioned it, right? But I wasn't too worried about you can argue which side you want to deploy. To be honest, it probably doesn't matter that much overall, given there's not much terrain on the map. But the one thing I would definitely do is I would definitely put the Orc Shaman in the Orc block to avoid Fireball and avoid Scorching Salvo. So that means the only way I can actually take him out is to get into melee, and then his Toxic Ichor comes into play. And that Toxic Ichor does Strength 4 AP2 hits, which is actually quite good against all of my guys. Like, none of them really like that, even the Knights. Like, AP2s, AP 0 or 1, the Knights are kind of laughing at you, but once you get up to 2, they're like, oh, this is a little bit dicey now, I'm not sure I like this. So that would force me, and then I'd also just basically just pile forward, right? I don't think the hanging back strategy was a good idea. Um, because it would be far better to have your shaman in the orc block, pushing forward as much as possible, getting in range of Scorching Salvo, because the one disadvantage I have, I've got lots of little units, and Scorching Salvo is great against lots of little units, even though stuff like the Knights and the Imperial Guard probably won't take too much damage. You're probably going to start whittling guys down, and you're going to cause a threat. And then once you get within 18 inches, if I start trying to run away, you've got the option of moving up and using his gun, his like magic weapon. Let's call it his shotgun. Using his magic shotgun, using his magic as a much more of a threat, and basically making me have to deal with this orc block, right? I think that would have been a better play, and then pushing up with the goblins and with the trolls. The risky one is the goblins because, I say, given I could counter deploy, assuming the Emperor Sunshine was playing second, you could definitely get the goblins are in a bit of a risk. That's just something I think you'd have to accept. You'd have to accept that you're probably gonna. So if you put the shaman, the other thing you can do with the shaman, not only do you have to deploy him in the orc block, I would also deploy him on one corner because although I could get into melee with him, you might be able to avoid it, right? If you put him on a corner, and because they've got a wide frontage, if they charge one of my guys, they can maximize contact but keep the shaman out of the fight potentially, which would be a very sneaky move, but actually really useful in that situation. Therefore, the shaman could be a little bit protected. Obviously, he can get into the fight if he wants to. He has got 3 attacks. He has got Toxic Ichor. But again, I think I would have played it much more defensively with my one with a single character who's not that tanky. Um, I'd have definitely put him in the unit and just shoved everything forward. Basically, very simple play, but like forced me to deal with the orcs and the trolls running at me. And it's like, yeah, you can take out the goblins, great, but then like my orcs and my trolls are potentially beating on other units, right? And obviously the main goal with the trolls is just don't get them flanked. I mean, what can you do with a double one charge, right? But that is something to consider whenever you have got a charge even no matter how odds. I think they needed a 6, so it was pretty good odds they would have made it, right? But like maybe even a 5. But yeah, whenever you are going to make a charge, it is always a risk of failure, so you do always need to consider where you're going to end up if you do fail. That's something I'm not very good at, to be honest. Right, I think that's enough of my strategy overview. Let me know what you think, everybody. If you're on the watching this on the Ninth Age forum, I'd love to know what you think there. If you're on YouTube, give me some comments and things like that. I had a couple of nice comments on my older battle reports this week, so that was definitely giving me a bit of motivation to keep on doing these. I know I've talked in the past about I sometimes prefer to write these things out, but I've had a lot of feedback that says you prefer videos, even if they're an hour long, an hour and a bit now. Um, so hopefully that's still the case. If you would, do you think you'd prefer this in written format though? Let me know because I do enjoy doing that too. But it probably takes a lot longer actually. So yeah, hopefully you enjoy that, guys. If you're playing Essence of War Advanced, let me know as well. I want to play more games of this. We'll try and get some different matchups as well, of course. I've got some friends that have also got some bigger armies. Um, I've obviously got tons and tons of orcs and goblins, so I want to play with them too. We might do a reverse match of this, or we might do like we're saying, Bart might want to try and build a list to beat mine, or have another game, different scenarios. There's so much variety to play in Ninth Age, and like even at this sort of some people say, oh, Essence of War, even Advanced is too simple for me or whatever, and I'm like, for me, I really enjoy the sort of complexity level it's pitched at. We got this game done. We were chilling out, drinking as you saw, and just like chatting all the way through. Bart got there late. Um, like an hour late, an hour into the night at this games club, and we still got it done in like plenty of time. And we were just like, we were messing around. I mean, I was taking photos as well, as you can see. We were messing around, putting the tokens down, and all this kind of. We could have sped this up so much more, and we still got it done in about 2 hours. So it's like, and that's moving at a snail's pace. I mean, you could probably still get a game of this size done in an hour if you weren't messing about, right? 1,000 points. Also, I would like to move up to bigger points values. Essence of War Advance ideally scales up to about maybe 1,600. Once you get to about 2,000-ish points, then you can move into Fantasy Battles Warband scale, um, which is a slightly smaller variant of Ninth Age Fantasy Battles. And obviously, once you get up to about 3,000 and over, then you probably want to move to the full Fantasy Battles rules. Although, that said, some people have said they're intrigued by the concept of using Essence of War Advanced rules to play really big games. Because by simplifying some of the rules, of course, it does make it a lot easier to play a huge game too. So that's maybe something to bear in mind. I also need to get a bigger game mat and maybe a bit more terrain to play on a bigger battlefield with a bigger army. Actually, I think I've got enough terrain. I don't have all the terrain you'd need for Ninth Age Fantasy Battles though, because obviously that expands into different terrain types such as water features and ruins and things like that. I don't have all those made yet, but one day I'll get there. Enough natter from me. I am sure you will agree. See you all next time for some more Ninth Age action or something different, but most likely going to be Ninth Age. All right, take care. Bye.